So let me introduce our next discussion. It is gamification in the real world, and it's moderated today by one of my favorite people. Now, almost everyone who's here is one of my favorite people, so that's convenient for me and for you, by the way. Big win for you, which is Jenn Van Grove. And Jenn is a social media reporter at Mashable. For those of you who follow social media, you'll know her. Are you gonna? Yeah, you should be. I think you should be here. Plus, you're so tall. So Jenn Van Grove is a social media reporter at Mashable. She covers web news, startups, industry trends, and writes about the implications of social sites for users and business. And I'm sure for those of you who follow social media, of course, you'll recognize Jenn right away. Jenn Van Grove. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Gabe. Hi, guys. Can you guys hear me okay? So we're going to talk about gamification in the real world, and we have some really great panelists for you. So I'd like them to actually go ahead and introduce themselves, and then give us, guys, 3 words that you associate with gamification.
Hi, I'm Blake Scholl. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Barcode Hero, which is a community where people can share recommendations about everyday and unique products that uses gamification to identify, surface, and reward experts in the community. And as far as a few words I would associate with gamification, I would say that fun is the new free.
Cool.
I'm Geoff Lewis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of TopGas. We're a company that's working with large offline loyalty programs, working to modernize them and make them leverage digital loyalty in new ways. And I think the 3 words that I would like to associate with gamification are profitability, profitability, and profitability.
Morning. My name is Tana. I'm the Vice President of Product Management at Shopkick. Shopkick strives to improve the way that we all shop in the physical world. We launched our product in August. It's the very first product that rewards people simply for walking in. So we provide people with points and offers when they step into stores. We partnered with Best Buy, Sports Authority, Macy's, American Eagle, Target, among others, and are just getting going. 3 words that I'd use to describe gamification: fun, obviously easy. It's supposed to make people's lives easier. And it's 2 words, but positive reinforcement. So 4, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. You're allowed.
My name is Brian Morrisroe. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of a company called Booyah. One of our first products was MyTown. We had, I think our peak was around 4 million users. And we focus on what we call, and these are kind of my 3 words, real world gaming, which is basically taking traditional gaming and overlaying it over your daily activities.
Thanks, guys. So all of you guys are doing some really exciting things combining location and game mechanics. So kind of want to focus around that. I cover them all a lot, actually. So really good panel. But I'd like to kind of start with how each of you are kind of employing location and game mechanics in the actual app to drive engagement. And we'll just go down the line and start with Blake.
So as far as how we're using gamification inside Barcode Hero, I think the best way to think of it is that our game layer is the face of our reputation system. So what we're trying to do with the application is provide a community where people share product recommendations and where it's easy to get recommendations from people you know as well as community experts. And so what we do is turn expertise into a competition. And if you played around with Barcode Hero, you'll find that you get points for scanning items, points for making recommendations. More points, the better your recommendations are. And that adds up to being king of a category, queen of a category. They're very sort of game-oriented rewards that recognize your expert status. And what we found is that the gamification really taps into people's motivation to share more and helps get more recommendations flowing and helps reward people for making better content.
Oh, thanks, Blake. Geoff, so TopGuest kind of turns, or associates check-ins with loyalty programs that I think are usually thought of as more traditional. Why don't you talk about how that works?
Certainly, yeah. What we're really trying to do is leverage existing currencies that people are already really engaged with. So here's a member of like Starwood Preferred Guest or Amex Membership Rewards, probably lots of folks. And those currencies have obviously a really high level of engagement. They've spent years building up a relationship with any given quote-unquote player, what we're trying to do is actually give people real rewards and status from those existing programs they're engaged with for new ways that they're engaging with the brand, such as checking in at hotels and airports via Foursquare or Facebook Places, taking pictures with Instagram or Pick Please, sort of all these writing reviews for TripAdvisor, sort of all these new forms of engagement that can happen online. Actually letting the loyalty program reward that via whether it's points or status, and in doing so actually get the data of, okay, how are our most loyal members, how are they benefiting our brand online, sort of engaging with our brand across all these disparate platforms, whether geolocation or not.
Yeah, and Top Guest just did a 2.0 relaunch in November, and they have some really interesting partners on board, most notably Virgin America. So Virgin America now lets you kind of get loyalty points for actually checking out Foursquare, which I think is pretty cool. So Evan, Shopkick, totally different than the Foursquares of the world. Why don't you talk about that?
Sure. Well, we're different in that we are solely focused on improving shopping. That's why we started the company. I would say that we do some things well and we do some things really poorly with gamification. We'll start with the things that we do well. Fundamentally, the service that we launched is a collection game. It's about being rewarded for stepping into stores, and people earn currency for doing that, and they can then turn those into rewards. That's been wildly successful, and I think it resonates with users. Things we haven't done well, and it's frankly because lots of us, we're trying to become gaming experts, but we're really not. Brian's a gaming expert, I'm not. We've got other elements in there with badges and level points, and frankly, we haven't really quite fleshed all of that out. We spend a lot of time thinking about what is the elder game in shopping, what does it mean when you get to level 16? We launched without really figuring that out, and I think we have some good ideas on what that elder game looks like, but there are things that we've done well, there are things we haven't done well, but it's a lot of fun because I think the content that we're focused on, shopping in and of itself, has sort of inherent gameplay. There's this idea of harvesting, collecting, winning every time you get a great deal. There's this emotional sort of high or win, and it's easy to sort of think about how you sort of incorporate gamification into that. So that's a lot of fun, but we're still learning along the way.
And Brian, you guys are probably the most game intensive, I think, of anyone on the panel. Can you talk about how you kind of bring virtual gaming into the real world experience?
Yeah, so our stated goal as a company is to really be a real world gaming company, particularly right now focusing on location. And we view that as essentially just a tool in the designer's toolbox. It's just another input that we leverage to create interesting game mechanics. And so My Town specifically is similar game mechanics to a Monopoly-style game where you can purchase and own a virtual representation of a real-world location. The interesting part of that is then that provides you kind of a window into the activities that are going on at that location, so you can see other people checking in. You can kind of see real-world information happening at that location as the prices kind of go up and down for that location based on activity. So it really is kind of blending traditional games with kind of a real-world input in, as you mentioned, a much more traditional gaming fashion.
Right. And it's pretty interesting, and you guys have been doing this for a little while now. The last number I saw was My Town had 3.3 million users. Right. Is that still correct?
Yeah, it's a little above that, but that's the last official statement that we
So over time, what kind of trends have you noticed in terms of user behavior, and has this changed over time? Have users started to do different things?
Well, so we view gaming, especially now, kind of gaming as a service, and so we constantly update My Town over time, and so that's actually probably been the biggest driver in terms of user behavior. But all in all, I think user behavior hasn't changed all that much from when we first launched. We actually had pretty substantial engagement early on. We were looking at over an hour a day playtime per user. With probably about 4 to 5 sessions, I would say.
Which is huge, right? Because this is
a
mobile application.
Yeah, at the time, it was, we were comparing ourselves to 10-minute applications on the phone, and so to see that kind of engagement, over multiple sessions throughout the day, we were really excited to see that. So that trend had pretty much continued throughout as we kind of developed more game mechanics and supported, kind of more real-world gaming elements. We actually included things like product check-ins, barcode scanning, things like that to add on top of our real-world kind of location check-ins as well.
Why do you think people are actually using this for an hour at a time? What drives that sort of engagement?
Well, the difference for us, as opposed to, say, a more utility app where you might not get the same engagement, is we are a game. You know, that's I think the play sessions are designed to be a lot longer. The engagement is designed in that way to actually give you different things to do while you're in the app. It's not just about the check-in. It's not just about the rewards. It's actually managing an economy. We have other things in there like, collectible mechanics that actually build towards kind of an overall goal. So we actually have multiple things for the users to do, as well as kind of the social mechanics of emailing and gifting your friends and all of that other stuff. So we draw on a lot more traditional game mechanics because we have more traditional gaming rule sets in our product.
And Evan, for something like Shopkick, which is a lot more passive in terms of how the user engages, what kind of behaviors are you noticing?
Sure. Well, we're finding that it is augmenting people's shopping behavior. I'll give you one example. Throughout the holidays, we were running promotions for our partners where we would increase the number of points you get for walking in. So on a particular day, instead of getting 70 kickbucks, you might get 140 kickbucks. For instance, today we're running a special with Target where you get 300 kickbucks simply for walking in. And what we found is that drives behavior. People will change their patterns to earn the points. We've also done some interesting things. Another example from Sports Authority where we set up scan missions where users would collect points for walking across the store and scanning and checking out different products. We haven't shared the numbers, but what's interesting is you look at the transaction data that you get back and you're able to sort of see that just simply by walking in and engaging with different products, people are more likely to buy and increase their basket size. So we're definitely seeing that that gamification is an interesting way to sort of augment the way we sort of interact in stores, and it's been a lot of fun.
So it sounds like with points, you guys can kind of engineer what people do, and you guys use kickbucks, right? That's your rewards currency. Have you noticed that there's any sort of particular reward that will really motivate the user to want more points?
I mean, people always want more, so that's an obvious one. But you know what's interesting is it's not really just the points. Our first application was an application called Cause World, where the user wouldn't really accrue any monetary benefit. They would just get points that they could donate to causes. We still have that element in Shopkick, and we've actually run similar scan missions with brand partners like Kraft, where you'd scan a bunch of products in a grocery store, and it would simply make a donation to Feeding America. And we weren't sure how our users would respond, but in fact, it was almost, if not equally motivating. So I think when I talk about positive feedback and reinforcement, there's this element of simply winning, right? Doing something and getting a reward, and that can come as a monetary reward, and kickbucks are a big part of that, or simply come as I feel great and I did something in a grocery store because normally it sucks, but I spent 30 seconds and I was able to donate to a cause.
Gotcha. And then, Geoff, it seems like your approach is a little bit more focused on the traditional loyalty program. So, airline, hospitality, that kind of stuff. Are you noticing that people are excited to kind of tie their social check-in behaviors with the Virgin America Rewards program? What kind of behaviors can you speak of?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's been interesting for us is that it's to become a member, to benefit from Top Guest, you sort of have to link your Foursquare account or your Facebook account with Top Guest, and then also link loyalty programs with Top Guest. So it's not the simplest onboarding process, and we're working to streamline it. But even with that friction, we found that when a company partners with Top Guest and starts offering their currency as a reward for check-ins, like as Choice is doing with us, Hilton Hotels, Virgin America, a bunch of other companies, their volume of check-ins increases on average 2x. So their total volume of check-ins, Foursquare, Facebook Places, on average when someone partners, increases 2x, which has been pretty cool for us to find. But at the same time, the points for check-ins isn't enough. Like
right.
it's going to wear out at some point. We're working on some other new things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love for us to talk about that later when we kind of hit what's next. But I'd be curious to know how you kind of sell Top Guest to the Virgin Americas of the world. Like, how do you tell them, hey, there's some sort of advantage here for you to associate value to something? I think most people who don't use location-based apps don't understand that there may be some sort of like social currency associated with the check-in.
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond just the value of the impressions and encouraging the impressions in people's social streams, the real value that the partners see is in merging their existing list of loyalty program members with all these different social accounts that people have. So right now, Virgin America, or if sort of a random airline like JetBlue looked at, okay, who's checking in at our JetBlue terminals, or there's no way for them to know who those people are vis-a-vis their existing database, vis-a-vis their existing list of customers. What TopGuest lets these brands do is sort of associate a Facebook user ID, a Foursquare user ID, with their database of existing members. They can start to do things like develop an influence score, a social influence score for all of their different members. So they can start to do things like give people special rewards, premier status based on the social influence that they have across these networks, in addition to just the monetary transactions that are happening.
Which I think is really interesting, and we can talk about that a bit more later. But Blake, you're a little bit more focused on product discovery and discovering products through friends via barcode scanning. So I'd like to hear about how users are actually using that. When I first started writing about barcode scanning a while ago, I thought it was just a really kind of neat idea, but at the same time I was like, who really wants to pull out their phone, scan a barcode, and look like a geek in front of all of their friends, essentially? So why don't you talk about what you're noticing?
Sure. So, a question to ask yourself is, do you have opinions about products? Are there products you love? Are there products you hate? And most people have opinions, and most people like sharing those opinions with their friends over dinner, over a drink, over email. But very, very few people actually capture their product opinions today on something like Amazon or on Yelp or various other review platforms. And so what we found with Barcode Hero is by making that process easy and fun, dramatically more people will capture their product recommendations. So about 30% of our users leave product recommendations for their friends or people who follow them on Barcode Hero versus sub 1% on an Amazon. And so what that lets you do is make recommendations more social. You can actually discover things from people you know, names you recognize. It could be your Facebook friends. It could be someone you're following on Twitter. And that recommendation coming from a trusted source is a lot more compelling. It's useful for discovery. And you don't have to read a big, long review because you know the source, and just a short sentence or sort of Twitter-style product review is enough to do it.
So you guys have kind of a hierarchy system, and that's part of the game mechanics. Can you talk about that? And does it actually motivate people to scan more things and do more with the application?
Sure. So our current game mechanics and levels are just very simple. There's this sort of Duke that you get in a particular category after a certain amount of activity. So for example, a typical first user experience in Barcode Hero is you get it on your iPhone, and it says find a product you love and go scan it. And so people go to their bookshelves, they pick up their favorite science fiction book, and bam, that's 10 points in science fiction, another 15, and you could be a Duke of science fiction. And well, if you're a science fiction fan, you've got multiple books, and now you're on to scanning the next one. And then you start to climb the leaderboard, and once you have passed everyone else up in the amount of sort of recommendations or scanning you've done, you could be king or queen of that category. And what we found is this actually motivates an insane amount of recommendation activity. It's not uncommon for people to spend an hour in Barcode Hero the first time they get the application, running around their home, capturing all the things that they love. Many of our users have put in literally thousands of recommendations. And it's very competitive, to be able to climb that leaderboard. So it's working great.
That's really interesting, and maybe later we can talk about what you kind of see as the next level of that. But guys, I'd like to kind of open it up and see if you guys could talk about some game mechanics or game thinking that you've tried that's absolutely failed, that you would never recommend anybody do. And this is open for everybody on the panel. Okay.
So this is not one of those I wouldn't recommend it. It's just we didn't solve it very well. So one of the big things that we try and overcome, particularly because we're a check-in app, is the validation issue. We had a lot of users early on checking in from half mile away, a mile away, things like that. And so we made a conscious decision up front with MyTown that we weren't going to worry about it too much, because that really wasn't what the game was about. But we did want to try and put some game mechanics in there that would try and solve that. And so we did things like better rewards for a more accurate GPS signal, kind of better, more point distribution on our leaderboards, things like that. And we probably went through 3 or 4 releases, about 3 or 4 months worth of testing on various aspects of trying to encourage a more accurate check-in or a more validated check-in. No matter what we did, the needle just did not move. The accuracy range, all of that other stuff was basically the same no matter what we did.
And what does that tell you? Does it means that people are really interested in that, in the
Well,
actual game?
there's 2 parts to that. One is we had a lot of iPod Touch users where their signal just
Gotcha.
wasn't great. But even within the iPhone users, the actual physical location or distance that the user was at to the location didn't matter as much as just their general interest in that location. And that's kind of, as we evolved MyTown, we kind of leaned more towards that, where we were not so much worried about their physical presence in the real world as just capturing that information about them really caring about a location enough to actually purchase it and take care of it and things like that.
That's so interesting, just because I personally have affinity, for certain places. It's just interesting to hear that experience. So what other things have you guys tried and failed?
I've got one, and I sort of already alluded to it. And this is one that I think people should, it's obviously one that works, but leveling up is an area where I wouldn't say we've failed, we just probably haven't fleshed out to the extent we should have. And we fell prey to the idea of like, oh, well, we need all of these gamification mechanics and we're going to try to jam them in, and we didn't really think that one through. I think the ones that are most successful are game mechanics where you've really thought through the user arc. I'm doing this to then lead to this, and there's this natural sort of feedback loop. With our leveling up, it's a bit artificial, and it's really unclear what the value proposition is to a user to level up. And we actually get users, really hardcore users, who will email us or post on our Facebook wall and say like, well, I'm at level 16, but what did I get? And the interesting thing is you can kind of be misled by data, because there are these, in casino language, there are whales. There are people who just level up, and it's amazing. I mean, I don't know why they do it, but they've like obsessive about getting to the top level. And that can be it's extremely misleading, because ultimately we want to be mass market. Shopping is something we all do. And I think there's an element of leveling up that will apply to everybody. We just haven't done it yet. And I think that's probably the one area that irks me the most, because it's so basic, it's fundamental to, I think, the way that we all think about shopping. You can be a better shopper than somebody else, and that's important to communicate. But we haven't done it very well in our sort of first version.
Geoff?
Yeah, I have one. One thing that we learned is that people really don't want to spam their friends, and I think that should have been obvious to us at the beginning. But no, in all seriousness, we did a test with Hilton's DoubleTree brand, and the basic premise was you could increase the level of status in Hilton Honors if you sent a quote-unquote gift from DoubleTree to 10 of your Facebook friends or Twitter followers. And if the gift had really been a gift, I think it would have worked, but the gift was like 25% off a room rate at DoubleTree. So it wasn't relevant, it wasn't contextual for the friends at all, and we had no engagement for it at all. So you have to be really careful with the types of incentives you use to get people to share things with their friends, which in retrospect should have been obvious. But.
Yeah, as a user, I hope you guys take that to heart.
So we've done some testing of game rewards versus other kinds of financial incentives, like running contests or giveaways, or one we did over the Christmas holiday was letting you enter a contest to win your entire Barcode Hero wish list. And to put it lightly, that was an abject failure. It turns out that the gaming rewards, the things that tap into particular passions and give people a new form of self-expression, beat the financial incentives every day. And this is not just recent. This goes back. I used to be at Amazon. We ran tests there where we would pay people for customer reviews. And what we'd find is that you would get customer reviews, but not ones that anyone would want to read. So what we found is that when you tap into people's passions and give them a form of self-expression, it works. And when you do things that are basically paying for engagement, and it's very clearly paying for engagement, you either don't get engagement or you don't get engagement you actually want.
So I'd like to kind of now talk about copycat behavior and maybe the science of game mechanics, because I think we're seeing a lot of repetition, replication. As a user, I'm kind of like, well, how much longer can we, get value out of check-ins? Is there something more? So what do you guys think about this? Like, what are some things that you think are kind of overused or a little bit trite? And what do you see as kind of, the science of this, and where can we go?
I'll jump in. So I think it's pretty clear that we're seeing a lot of mechanics get repeated in a lot of applications, badges, check-ins, points. And I think it's inevitable that consumers will tire of those kinds of motivations. And we all know that from gaming, there's game fatigue, and you want a new mechanic. And as the whole industry jumps on the same mechanics, I think that's likely to be accelerated.
Yeah.
So I think the questions that you want to ask as you're designing game mechanics are what evergreen motivation are you tapping into? What kind of behavior or psychology you're tapping into that's going to be repeated a lot over time? So for example, if your game mechanic's tied to something that's a journaling behavior, like a blogging or tweeting kind of behavior, then that's something you can hold on to over time and maintain. Or for us, opinion sharing. Opinion sharing is something that people always want to do. That's not about to go away. And our game mechanics are aligned with that, and we think they're going to be more durable for that reason.
Yeah, for us, I mean, my litmus test is when I walk up to a user and show them shopping or somebody's used it and ask them what they think. If the first word that comes out of their mouth is, oh, it's a game, I feel like we haven't done our job. And the reason, I think we're different than some other people in that we're not necessarily just trying to build a game. We're trying to build a service that makes shopping better. And I think when we can start to blend game and real world, where the first word that comes out was, that was fun, that was easier, then I think we've done our job. And I've kind of made this point earlier, but I think shopping in and of itself is a really interesting game. And a lot of game mechanics, and we're to blame for this as well, have sort of arbitrarily put on game mechanics on top, when actually there are natural game mechanics within shopping. People wouldn't call Groupon a game, but I'd argue it's a pretty compelling game. I go to American Apparel and I got a hoodie for 50% off. I won that game. It's almost like they were paying me and I won. So there's this element of discovery and winning with something like Groupon. And I don't think anybody would call it a game, but it's got some interesting game mechanics. They could probably play up some things even more. But that's kind of the way I think about it in terms of, I have a love-hate relationship, because I think if you can go overboard, and I think a lot of people are, I think we'll sort of slowly equilibrate to people finding the right balance. And for us, the right balance is where somebody describes it as fun and easy and not explicitly a game, because I think they should see shopping in and of itself as a game.
Yeah. And Brian, your background at Blizzard, I think, would make your answer a little bit interesting. I'd be curious to see if you think that people are kind of going for a low-hanging fruit here in this space, and what kind of opportunities there actually are to actually do some more sophisticated things.
Well, so I view copycatting as actually a pretty good thing right now, just because it's so early on in kind of the gamification industry. A lot of people, I think, are just trying to learn what game mechanics actually are, right? And I think the easiest place to start is with kind of what's out there already. And I think Evan brought up a great point. Like, leveling systems work in certain types of genres. They don't work in everything. But it's great that people experiment in new ways. We have it in my town. We tried it in some other things, and it wasn't as successful. And so, for me, I think looking at just from a traditional gaming background, and as we develop kind of our next generation of location-based games, we really just kind of analyze each gaming mechanic and ask the question, why do we want to use this particular mechanic, and what is it going to get us from our user? I think in the talk right before this, the concept of asking what metric you're trying to push is actually the right question to ask anytime you implement like the check-in or a leveling system or a virtual item distribution or anything like that. What are you trying to get your user to do? And so that's really kind of our approach. So I think going back to the original question of whether this is copycat is kind of an issue. I don't think so. I think it's just a starting point for a lot of people to learn.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. I'd be curious too, for the whole panel, where can we go with this? Geoff, especially, let's talk about Top Guest, and let's talk about check-ins and loyalty programs, and then, even as Gabe was saying, loyalty and engagement. Is there sort of that opportunity through your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Top Guest, what we're really trying to do is give our partner brands, our partner programs, a true picture of how engaged their loyalty program members actually are across all these different means they have to demonstrate their engagement. Right now, you can transact with a brand. That's one way to demonstrate engagement. There are all these digital ways that you can demonstrate engagement. We're trying to give our partners a full picture of that. I think that, I think you're going to see more and more businesses trying to tap into that, use gamification online to sort of capture that information. I think where we're really going, though, in the space over the next few years is, I think the copycat behavior now is great, because in every sort of vertical, one or two winners are going to emerge. I mean, they're going to be the winners that sort of have the best game mechanics. So if we take the barcode scanning space, hopefully it'll be Blake, and there's going to be one barcode scanning app that really nails it and really taps into these deep needs. I think that's what's exciting about where we're at now is we can see all this experimentation, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens over the next few years. So.
Okay. Do we have time for questions, Danielle? Okay. It looks like we have to wrap up. Sorry about that, guys. I would have loved to open it up for questions, but I want to thank the panelists for joining us this morning. I really appreciate their opinion. They're doing some really interesting things, and I hope you'll follow up with each of them.